What's up, everybody? Kyle here for UNC Edible Campus and EarthWeek 2020. Now, I know everybody's stuck inside these days, and so hopefully that means you can get outside and do a little gardening. Today on this video, I'm going to show you how to mix up your own potting mix. It'll save you a little money if you're doing a bunch of container gardening, and it's just kind of fun to mix your own stuff up. And then I'm going to show you how to start some seeds in a few of these little containers over here. Hey everybody, so here I'm going to show you how to make a very simple potting mix. It's great for starting seeds. It works very well as just a standard container mix if you're going to be mostly doing container gardening at home. It's got 5 ingredients. The first one is peat moss. We've got perlite. We've got a little bit of compost, thanks to Compost Now and Bricks Compost. We've got a little. This is a little fertilizer. It's organic, plant tone. It's good for vegetables and flowers, whatever you need to use it for. And then we've just got a little garden lime, and this is just going to be to adjust the pH and bring it a little closer to 7, as peat moss tends to be quite acidic. I like to use a wheelbarrow to mix things up in, and a 5-gallon bucket will be my measuring container. So the first thing I'll do, we want to use equal parts peat moss, perlite, and compost. So I'll just fill up a 5-gallon bucket of each of these things. Now don't worry if you're not exact on your measurements. This stuff's going to be good even if you're a little off. Feel free to play around with the mix a little bit once you get the hang of it. Now as you can see, this stuff can be a little bit dusty. So when you do this, it's a good idea to either wear a mask, or what I have done is just brought my garden hose over and just get a little wet, and it'll knock some of that dust down. You don't have to breathe all that stuff in. So now that we have our peat moss, perlite, and compost, I'm just going to take 1 handful of this garden lime and throw it in here. This stuff is very powerful, so you really don't need much. As you can see, I'm just using 1 handful. And again, that just helps to keep the pH kind of balanced. Then I'm just going to take a little bit of this plant tone, again about a handful, and throw it in here. All that's going to do is, that's just a standard fertilizer, so it's going to give it a little nitrogen, a little phosphorus, a little potassium. And now the fun part, we get to mix all this up. Now you can use a shovel, or I'm just going to dive in with my hands. So you really got to get in there. You want to mix this stuff up as much as possible. And again, if it's a little dusty, just come through and give a little water, and that'll really knock down some of the dust particles, and you don't have to breathe all this stuff in. Now it's hard to see this, but when you're mixing this up, you can tell it's very light, it's very airy. This stuff's going to drain really well while also holding on to moisture. And that's really what you want out of a potting mix. Once everything's nice and mixed up, we're ready to start some seeds. The first thing to consider when you're getting your seeds going is what kind of container you want to use. Now I've got a few different examples here of different trays specifically for seed starting. As you can see, they're varying sizes. This is a 72 cell tray. Here we have a 128 cell tray. And today, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be starting some sunflowers in an 18 cell tray. The main difference in the sizes of the trays is just the amount of potting soil in each specific cell. So if you've got a smaller cell, you're going to have to transplant the seedlings out of these containers more quickly. By starting in a little larger cell tray, I can leave the little seedlings in there a little longer. Now, you don't obviously have to use something specifically designed for starting seeds. You could get creative, and I've seen people use milk jugs cut in half, or little plastic bottles, or even little Dixie cups. You can be creative and use anything that's going to hold some potting mix. Just make sure you drill some holes or poke some holes in the bottom so that if there's excess water, it will drain. The first thing we're going to do is fill the cells up with our potting mix. So what we want to do here is get every one of our cells nice and full. And then we can just kind of brush off any excess. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come through and we're going to compact all this. You'll see when you start pushing down on it, you can really create a little more space. Now what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to add even more potting mix to each individual cell. Because the more potting mix in each cell, the more water retention we're going to have. So I'm just going to come through, like I said, press all this down, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did, and just add a little more potting mix to top all these off. And again, I'm just going to wipe off the excess there. So what I'm doing here is I'm just getting all this a little wet beforehand, so when we go to water afterwards, we don't have to water quite as much and risk washing away our seeds. Now, as I said, I'm planting some sunflowers. Anytime you're planting seeds, it's a good idea to look on the back of your package. There's a lot of very useful information back here. It's going to tell you days to germinate, seed depth, and seed spacing and thinning. In the case of sunflowers and a lot of other seeds, the seed depth is going to be 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. Now, what I like to do is once we have all our little cells here, I like to take a little pencil or a pen and just make a little declivity right in the middle. And that's where we're going to drop our seeds. Now, a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, that's not very much, so be careful not to plant your seeds too deep. That's a common mistake. Okay, now that we've got our little hole in each of these, I'm just going to take a single seed, place one in each hole, this process is going to work whether you're starting flower seeds or vegetable seeds. Now, once I have one seed in each hole, I'm going to come back through and just cover the seeds and firm the mix around them. Voila! Now I'll come through and apply a little more water. Now, for the vast majority of seeds, all that is needed for germination is moisture and warmth. So what you're going to want to do is put your started seed tray in a warm spot. If you've got a spot in your house that's perhaps a window with some good sunlight, or some people even put them on special seed starting heating pads, which warms them from the bottom. And then you're going to want to make sure that your potting mix doesn't dry out. So pretty much every day it's a good idea to come through and water all this. What I like to do is get a little spray bottle and you can come through and spray, and it keeps you from washing them out because you don't want to apply too much water as well. So after your seeds germinate, you're going to start having little seedlings. And at this point they're going to want some light. Now there's a few different ways you can accomplish this. If you've got a nice sunny spot inside, perhaps a south-facing window, that would be an adequate amount of sunlight. I put these outside because I do not have a nice sunny spot. They work fine. You don't want to give them too much sun. If you can see, some of these got a little bleached because I put them in too direct of sunlight. These are still little babies, so we don't want to stress them out too much. Morning sun is better than afternoon sun. Real professionals will have fluorescent lights set up in their house, and they will have lights hanging very, very close to the seedlings, and that's a perfect setup. But for the rest of us, just to stick these outside somewhere where they'll get some nice morning sun and keep them watered, and they'll be very, very happy. For a lot of plants, they're going to be ready to be transplanted in somewhere between 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. You take a little tool like this. You can use, this is like a tongue depressor, but you could use a little butter knife or something like that. And just take your little seedling and pop them up out of the cell like this. And just observe the root growth. Now, as you can see, these roots have made it all the way to the bottom of the cell, but they're not bound yet. They're not really tightly wrapped in there. So this would be a perfect time to transplant this little guy into either a larger container, great use of our potting mix, or you could put him directly into the ground, and they'll be very happy that way as well. I'm going to show you just another example for these marigolds here. Again, you want to be very gentle, but they pop right out. So, as you can see, these roots haven't quite taken over that whole space inside of the cell yet. So it would be a good idea to maybe let these guys go for another week or so until they get just a little larger. And then they'll be happily transplanted again into a larger container or outside. I hope this video was helpful for everybody. It's a great time to be gardening with everybody kind of stuck inside. Stay tuned for more Edible Campus UNC EarthWeek 2020 videos, and we hope everybody's having a great time outside gardening.